let's set the scene and get the elevator pitches from yourself. Just to share with the audience a little bit about what you do, who you do it with, that kind of thing, so they know where you fit in the ecosystem. Starting with your good self, Nikki.
Sure. Hi, nice to see everyone today. I'm CCO at Push Gaming. We produce amazing, innovative content for the industry and engagement tools, and very, very active in the industry. And I myself have been in the industry for well over 15 years, which I guess kind of makes me an industry veteran. Yeah, and I'm really happy to be here to be discussing the really hotly anticipated topic of M&A and the opportunities in the US.
Fantastic. Thanks, Nikki. Thank you for joining us. And coming over to you, good self, Martin.
Yeah, good afternoon, Oisin. Good afternoon, guys. I work for Gig, and we are a market-leading provider of turnkey platform and services. I've been in the industry, in and around the industry for 15 years. Originally in recruitment, so many of you may know me from LinkedIn, perhaps. And now, obviously, I'm really excited about talking today about the situation in the States.
Fantastic. Welcome, Martin. Great to have you here. And coming over to Martin, number 2, Martin Lycka. If you could share with the audience a little bit about what you do. Thank you.
I shall most happily do that. Good afternoon, everybody. Apologies that I can't be there with you in person. Me and the family have finally managed to relocate to the States. I've been in the industry for 12 years. I should have apologized for cramping the style of my fellow panelists that are there in person. Owing to my accent, that does not happen to be Scottish by any means. So really sorry about that. I've always been on the regulatory side of things, most recently tackling the US and other American markets, and I've added responsible gambling to my role as well. And I suppose, despite Entain being the talk of town lately, I hope everybody will understand that I will not be talking about that other operator whose name starts with D on this panel.
Okay, fair warning. Okay, no Slido questions about that one. Thank you very much. And congratulations on the move to the States. Brilliant news. And coming over to yourself, Max, just if you could share with the audience a little bit about what you do over there at Strive Gaming. Thank you.
Thanks so much, and I'm loving the energy from this panel already, and some great moderating and panels I've seen so far. So great here, and good to be on this panel. Thanks for having me. I'm CEO of Strive Gaming. We're an iGaming platform totally focused on North America. We very much expect and have the ambitions to be the leading B2B platform in the space. You spent 5 years before co-founding and launching Strive, as I was 5 years at a CCO of Canby, and was heavily involved in their commercial strategy on the executive management team of helping them succeed as the leading B2B sportsbook there. So yeah, I've just had 2 months now in the US and Canada. Feel very, very tired, but it's been a great journey, and long may that continue, and looking for great success. So very much looking forward to this panel today. Thanks for having me on.
Fantastic. Welcome all. Great to have you here. Okay, and we're actually going to stay with yourself, Max. Now, you've been kind of working in the US market. You've got a great perspective on it. What do you see in terms of activity there? Do you think it's speeding up, it's slowing down? What's your take on the ground?
I think that everyone will clearly recognise that M&A activity in the US it's just an incredible marketplace. If anyone had an understanding of EBITDA multipliers and their valuation assessments, there aren't so much of that kind of logic being placed at the moment. It's actually, I believe, more focused on how do you create barriers to entry, create specialisms and expertise within larger organisations within the marketplace, got access to state-by-state markets that they otherwise might not be able to achieve, and technology that's hard to replicate, that would take multiple years to do so. I think this is, and databases. I think that's where M&A activity is drawing most of its activity at the moment. I think very interestingly, we saw the Aristocrat bid for Playtech. That's another consolidatory move into the digital space from one of the leading content providers on the land-based perspective, particularly to tribal nations in the US. And of course, there are much larger M&A activities going on at the moment. But I think that for the top 5 things I just mentioned previously, that's kind of what's driving a lot of the activities. And it's more about creating those those blockers or enhancing your capabilities to succeed in the US and Canada, more so than just having very direct multipliers and valuations. So if people are worried about or feel concerned about the valuations that are going out there, it's because they're seeing a much longer-winded or long-winded tail on their M&A activity. So I think there is more to come. There's going to be more deals that are going to surprise us. It's going to be very interesting, but there's definitely consolidation that will happen globally as a result of this M&A activity. But what I can say is that probably means that there's a lot more opportunity for those small and medium businesses that perhaps elsewhere outside of the US have been worried about or been trying to compete. There's potential for Europe and South America and Africa and Australia-based businesses to be able to benefit in their local markets or local continents, whilst there's a lot of US activity going on as well. But that's just my thoughts on what's happening at the moment. I just think there's a lot more to come.
Very good. View from the ground, exciting times. And coming over to this, I'm going to call you Martin C and Martin L up there. So coming to you, Martin C. Okay. Now, Max mentioned the wonderful word of valuations. What's your take on the level of valuations? Does it seem sensible, a bit high? What's your take?
Okay, well, if we talk about the multiples, I think we can all accept they're a little bit crazy. But, you know, if we look at normal digital organisations that are involved in M&A, they're getting nowhere near the size of these multiples. And I think that the interesting thing is, Max mentioned the tail, and I think this is really, really important, because ultimately these multiples are being devised on the basis of the value of the entire market. Yeah. And there's factors that mean that we're unsure about that could actually affect the volume of revenue that these acquisitions and the overall conglomerates that come together in one unit can actually achieve. If we think about two things. Max also mentioned databases. Yeah. So FanDuel and DraftKings have got significantly bigger databases than their competition because they were in fantasy beforehand. But the question is that does a fantasy customer translate into a sports or a casino customer? This is something that is yet to be answered, in my opinion. And then the second thing, and Max again mentioned it because he covered all 5 points. Very well, Max.
Good man.
But the other thing is the tribes. Oh, yeah. So if we think about California, and there's a significant amount of tribes in California, sure, and they're taking steps in order to block actual online being available in that particular state. So there's going to be a vote next November, I believe. And if that goes the way of the tribes, then it means it will make it incredibly difficult for any of these larger organizations to get access to a $10 billion market. So I think they're being very optimistic. Normally when you do an analysis, you have a low, a medium, and a high case. But I think this is high on steroids cases that they're working on. And they're not considering the ramifications of some of the elements that they don't have any control of. Yeah, indeed. And it seems to be like a landscape that is, literally so many shifting planes, so many kind of unknown unknowns, and that kind of thing to affect what the valuation could actually mean. That's a great point. And coming over to yourself, Nikki, the name DraftKings has come up quite a bit, and of course there was that Hindenburg report, and shares were dropped off the back of it. From your perspective, do you think it's maybe more beneficial coming in the second wave, or what might be the benefits of being in the second wave?
Yeah, I mean, from a supplier point of view, there's a lot to be learned. There's so much unknown about the landscape in the US. The regulatory landscape changes from state to state. There seems to be little kind of economies of scale, I guess, if you like, between the regulatory bodies. So it's a very difficult place to navigate, and it's something that, there's definitely a benefit of looking at who has already entered the market and how they have been able to kind of launch content from a supplier point of view across multiple states, and how that can roll out so that you can learn from that, because I'm sure there's been a lot of mistakes made and things to learn from. So I do think it is beneficial to perhaps be in the second wave and get that real understanding of what is involved with entering that market. But of course, there's a huge opportunity there. Push aren't actually in the US at the moment, but it's a market that we're really looking at closely. The M&A activity, I think, provides lots of opportunity for kind of small to medium-sized businesses to enter. And I think that, with the, as Martin mentioned, the databases of players, potentially, the iGaming player being worth potentially 7 times a sportsbook player, is a really attractive opportunity for a game supplier such as Push. So we're really watching the market really closely, and looking at how we're an online business first, a mobile first company. We don't have any kind of land-based heritage like a lot of the slot providers that are out there at the moment in the US. So it's about how we establish that brand there and how we work with these big conglomerates to really make our mark in that industry, in that landscape, basically, in the US.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nikki. Yeah, very good points. And coming over to yourself, Martin L. on the big screen here, joining us virtually in Valletta. Talk to us a bit about the state of play with regulation. Is there much in the way of harmonization there? How might regulation and changes in regulation impact the M&A landscape? What's your take on regulation over there?
I believe it's fair to say that it's been relentless. If you think about it, the US sports betting market or markets opened only 3 years ago, and by now 30 plus states have regulated, and there are others in the pipeline. To address your point about harmonization, I suppose on the one hand, a lot of states would look at the likes of New Jersey, perhaps to a lesser extent Nevada, as a potential starting point, but then there's been a lot of creativity, if you will, a lot of local idiosyncrasies have been introduced into all the relevant legislative and regulatory pieces. As my fellow panelists have very pertinently pointed out, there are a number of players that don't have, or either do not exist in Europe, or are not of the same magnitude if you look at the US landscape. And I suppose all of us on this panel, and I can imagine that most of the audience, we would be coming at it from the European perspective. So a steep learning curve. At the same time, it does feel like a rerun of the European regulatory development, state by state. Different rules trying to regulate the same product. Operators being, if not desperate, then at least keen to take advantage of any economies of scale, if any are to be had. So to give you a straight answer, there is some harmonization in the sense that the legislative rules in the individual states to some extent do resemble each other, but above and beyond that foundation, it's very, very different indeed. You need to go state by state. Access is absolutely critical, and it can be restricted, as we've seen on the examples of the likes of New York, Florida. Of course, it might happen in California. I believe Martin C. mentioned the tribes. They have a critical role to play, and they seem to be getting in the stride of trying to get most of their existing rights to be able to expand their own offerings. So if I may paraphrase the point about valuations on steroids, I believe it's regulation on steroids as well, with all those states producing sports betting regulation. And let's not forget that as things stand at the moment, online casino regulation seems to be lagging far behind. But my view is that in 2022, 2023, all this will start picking up, and there are bound to be new issues to address while having to tackle the already existing issues.
Yes, very good. Thank you. Very, very sharp analysis there. I like it. And we're going to come over to yourself, Martin C., as you are known, for the next few minutes. Talk to us a bit about, Martin L. mentioned that there was not so much harmonization there, but there's going to be harmonization on steroids and that kind of thing. Are there examples that are there opportunities that need to be taking advantage of now that may disappear in the future? What would your advice be about these kind of, the places where the regulation doesn't quite match up,
Well, actually, that question flows perfectly into the presentation that came beforehand by James King.
Yeah.
because ultimately it provides an opportunity for tech-led businesses to provide solutions that are very difficult to provide. I think we do have a base. Well, we will have a base in some states with GLI, okay?
Yes.
But the states tend to be building on top of that and putting their own nuance on what they believe is important from a regulatory perspective. But from a tech perspective, from a building solutions perspective, it actually plays into the hands of organizations that are agile and can identify and analyze the regulations quickly and build a solution that matches those. So it's an opportunity for smaller businesses, again, to actually get a piece of the pie.
Very good. And Nikki, I mean, do you think there's any, a parallel to be drawn between what's happening in America now and anything that has happened in Europe, for example? Because we're all very familiar with the European market. How would you kind of transpose that?
I think that having that experience in Europe and, your company, my company, we've been operating in the European space for a long time, and navigating that, it's almost a minefield of regulation from country to country. I think we need to look at the US in the same way. It's 54 states, I think, 54 states in the US. Each of, when they all open up, will have slightly different nuances. But I think having that background in Europe and being able to navigate that across the various different regulated markets in Europe will stand, agile companies in good stead to be able to enter into that market a little bit more seamlessly and be able to navigate it. And having a really good compliance team, having a really kind of informative and a compliance team that can kind of keep up to date with the changes, which are so rapid, is really key to any business looking to enter into the US.
Yeah, absolutely. Wise words. Thank you. And coming over to yourself, Max, what's your reflection on what Nikki just said about having the right team members in place? Because obviously you're over there on the ground. You've kind of seen all this evolve and develop. Are there any things that you've had to do as a CEO that your company has had to do to kind of ride this wave, to prepare for where it's going to go, and to look out for this, regulation on steroids and this kind of harmonization on steroids that is due to come, according to Martinell?
Well, Martin's right anyway, right from the beginning. The regulation is absolutely rapid in the US, and I think some people may not have expected that it would be so rapid. And now we've got this huge move in sports wagering, and let's see what happens next with iCasino. Maybe it's not as quick, but certainly it's happened, and you can see that Pennsylvania and Michigan numbers are doing quite well for iCasino, particularly for Entain with their work with BetMGM in Michigan. Particularly, it's been a great standout how companies can succeed. And then again, if we talk about waves, but when is the wave? Like, there isn't just one single wave domestically across the US. There are multiple ones depending on states that will regulate. And we talked about California, but there's also what's going to happen next with Texas. That's going to be huge. Obviously, we have the New York bid that's quite restricted in terms of numbers. Florida, what we're trying to do with what's happening with the Seminoles right now, to what extent will that roll out? And then there's still a multitude of other states. So it's kind of like wondering at what point do we say that what really is a first wave and a second wave or third wave. I think there's still opportunities for people to join in as suppliers or B2Cs, operators in these other states and do deals. I think from Strive Gaming's perspective, the critical thing is, as what I think everyone's talked about here, we know in particular that having the right technology is absolutely fundamental. It needs to be something that can be hugely scalable from our perspective. Considering that sports wagering is the driver at the moment of regulation, then it needs to be technology that can scale with the peaks and troughs of sports wagering traffic that's obviously different from casino. And that's something that we've particularly been focusing on. And then in terms of interacting in the US and Canada, there's a slightly different message in the way that we may otherwise be discussing it here in Malta today, is that whilst we know that the technology that we may be able to develop is very appealing from a regulatory landscape perspective, I think over in the US and Canada, they very much want to hear that how you're setting up to be American, in essence, or Canadian. So it's really important that there is extensive amount of staff and support and understanding of US sports and casino patrons, and interacting with the retail and online databases and how they engage with each other, and the multi-vertical engagements like Martin C. mentioned before about how does fantasy players transfer across, how does table games players transfer across from casino poker players, and then how do you get them online? And there's this huge, there's so much growth within what's happening over there in the US that there's definitely an opportunity for more suppliers to enter the market. There's certainly more opportunities for B2Cs still to make a play, but consolidation would be the big home front, which I guess, which is why this whole panel's put together. But for us, it's just really being a very scalable business in the US and having people on the ground that know about wagering, casino and that, and how to convert those players. And ultimately, the big battle also to add that I see is, with all this consolidation and money being spent, is the next battlefield is retaining them, and what that and how you retain them. Because it's great having the databases and spending big bucks and bonuses. Caesars, for example, everyone will discuss their $5,000 match your bet bonuses, and there'll be others making big plays. But technology is the core of how you retain your players and the expertise that you have in organisations, and that's a big battlefield as well, which I think is driving a lot of M&A now.
Indeed. So it sounds like we've kind of been through a period of land grab. The big players have gone over there, try to hoover up as many of the right people as possible to kind of prepare the ground. But it sounds like there's still opportunities there. But it's a place where, as Max has just said, there's phenomenal growth. We've also got brands looking, for many, many multiples of revenue in terms of their projections and valuations, etc. Open question for anybody who wants to jump in. Do we think that regulation is keeping up with the financial and commercial speed of the sector over there? Is it a race? Are they in harmony? Does something need to happen in one place or the next to even things out? What do we think is going to happen with that balance? So, open question.
Who wants
I'm happy to take it if you want me to.
Oh, fantastic. Well volunteered. Thank you, Martin.
Well, I suppose what I've certainly experienced, and I believe it extends to the whole industry, has been sort of a cluster effect, in the sense that a state would regulate, and to your point, the neighboring states would all of a sudden realize that they may be missing out, and then they start thinking, we need to catch up, because otherwise our people, there are literally no physical borders here in the States, between the states. They would drive down to the nearest town in the neighboring state, they will place their bets there, and then they'll come home. So there might be a loss in potential tax revenue. So in this sense, the regulation has had to keep up with the commercial developments and the demand, put it simply. And I suppose Max made a couple of crucial points that I would like to echo. Completely agree that on the technology side, all these operators, regardless of their size, need to be as nimble as possible to be able to keep up. And I suppose the other critical factor, and I would not shy away from calling it a cultural revolution, is all the hype associated with sports betting. Now, people watching football in the States, football as in American football, not football as in football or soccer, if you will, 2, 3, 4 years ago, you wouldn't have gotten any betting adverts because they were simply illegal. These days, ESPN has programs that are dedicated to betting, and they are building on their tradition of fantasy sports, they are building on their tradition of fantasy leagues, I'm in a couple of them, pick them competitions and all that. So I believe that the cultural revolution in the States is very much being channeled by the TV stations and the sports, and perhaps, and that will be my final point, that also explains, or is in my view one of the reasons why online casino has not picked up that quickly, because I would suggest it's very difficult to translate online casinos into TV programs, or into something that people who watch sports on TV could easily relate to.
Great points. Thank you. Thank you very much, Martin. And coming over to the other Martin here in Valletta, Malta. We've heard individual states being mentioned, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Michigan. Do you think there's a tension between the states doing their own thing and the startups who are servicing the industry over there? Because obviously, the world of tech is kind of about a global audience and, super servicing people across boundaries. How is kind of tech fitting into this fragmented landscape in terms of US regulation?
I don't think it's a tension. I think that as Europeans, we tend to look at the US as one market, but as rightly been pointed out already, it's actually 50 different countries.
Yeah, right.
And that's how we have to look at it.
Yeah.
So, yes, like in New Jersey, with the DGE, there's lots of hoops that you have to jump through. The regulation is complex, okay, but that's the name of the game. And from our perspective at GIG, that's a positive thing, in all honesty, because it means that 25 different platform providers can't provide what is required in that market. We know we can do that. We've done it since 2018. So I don't see it as a tension. I see it as an opportunity.
I like it. Excellent. Does anyone else want to jump in on that? Or, another question I'm curious about is just, if you have any key predictions for the future or key recommendations, if there are folks here that kind of curious about getting into the space, maybe in the second wave or the third wave, there's going to be multiple waves. Are there any mistakes that you've seen other people make that you would like to avoid, or any particular kind of fast track tips that you've seen that you think, this is a good idea for, in the space of M&A, in the space of tech innovation, etc., or kind of addressing the market in the specific way that the US needs to be addressed?
I don't think. Sorry
No, please, please.
I don't think there's any kind of fast track available for the US. I think it has to be navigated very, very carefully.
Sure.
And as I said, you can learn from the first entrance into the markets, into the US market, and kind of learn from that as you go forward. But you need to, as Martin said, need to be agile. You need to be able to respond to the regulation from a tech point of view. I think there's a lot of for suppliers with their own platforms, such as ourselves, there's a lot of auditing that needs to happen, and we need to make sure that we're nimble enough to make the required changes to be able to kind of enter the market. But also, I guess, from a consolidation point of view, from the operators that are consolidating within the US, can they do it quickly enough? As Martin mentioned, the platform reliability will be massively key to retaining players, and there's nothing new there. There's nothing new to acquiring and retaining players. We've seen it. We need to learn from the European market and what we've learned there, how that's regulated over time, and apply the same logic again, I think, to the US, but across multi-state. So I think that needs to be kept in mind as well. Our platform's going to be reliable enough to retain players, as well as the big offers and the acquisition plans to bring the players in the first place. And a big challenge, obviously, as mentioned, is really the cross-sell into the iGaming space, into casino. It's not inherent as part of the culture, as Martin mentioned. It's fairly new, and it's about how innovative gaming suppliers and companies, supplying into that market can really take advantage of those opportunities and a new type of customer.
Yeah, indeed.
As well as the old school sports bettor, fantasy sports player. How do we appeal to them as well as perhaps a new generation?
Yeah, well said, absolutely. So don't, ignore the operational side of things at your peril. If you can't scale, you'll lose customers, and it's a key opportunity. You don't want to be doing that. We've got about a minute left. I'm just going to open it up. Does anybody else want to jump in? Yes, okay, Max, good man. Thank you.
So yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, I think really crucially and this is a bit more Martin L's perspective, but from a regulatory perspective, whether you're an operator or a B2B supplier, I think really understanding state by state the political dynamics are really important when you enter a market, whether you're trying to sell directly to customers or you're doing a B2B pitch to operators. It's understanding from one state to the next who are the real powerhouses to influence the regulation in that landscape, because I've seen people be, the way that we message, if we're talking about messaging, communicating to the US, is it's not really the US, it really is state by state. And if you are going to go to a certain state and try and operate in that state, it might be one that's heavily, for example, influenced by tribal nation. And then to say anything negative about customer databases or saying that land-based is not really the focus is going to negatively impact how you're perceived when you're entering that marketplace. So any state you go into, it's really important that we find that you understand who's in there and how they make their decisions and what they want to hear and how you reinforce that message. And that also relates to your own technical setup, because from one state to the next, you're going to need to be different. So if you are coming to a state that heavily influenced by their own, by land-based customer databases, then they're going to want to see that you have an ability to serve them on the land-based and have technology that can scale across, online and retail and cross-serving those kind of customers. And I think that's really, really important. And also, as the US scales, exactly what Martin said, there's no borders, physical borders, but there is the legal Wire Act requirements, which may or may not further be dismantled at some other later stage. But if you're going to drive between one state and the next, there needs to be some sort of technology that enables you to track, hold your same account from one state to the next in a smooth manner, both as a customer and as an operator to see that, but in a way that adheres to Wire Act. And then also that, so there's so much technological and regulatory, political and messaging perspectives that I think you have to take when you go to the US, which is really critical. And I think if you're not really focused on it and you won't get really deeply put resources behind it, I don't think it's worth anyone's time, whether it's an operator or a B2B supplier. I think it really needs absolute dedication. It's really completely very, very difficult, but so much opportunity still there, of course.
Amazing. Well, it sounds very much like a land of opportunity, but you need to really just go for it and, have the right partners, the right approach, the right people, and very much the right technology, and look out for that regulation. Always be on the right side of it. So that's all we have time for. Ladies and gents, please join me in welcoming our wonderful two pair of Scots on the stage, Nicola Longmuir and Martin Collins, and joining us virtually, Martin Lycka and Max Meltzer. Thank you so much. Fantastic. A brilliant chat. I learned so much from that. Thank you so much.